What's up, Patreon family? This is your girl Megan from the HoodAstroQ, and today I am coming to you guys once more with yet another celebrity birth chart reading. This time on none other than Kevin Gates, aka I eat the border. He is known for eating border mainstream. All right, he was the first person to talk about it on a public platform, and then literally before we knew it, the whole world started talking about eating booty like groceries, and now it's become somewhat normative for people to talk about like tossing salad. It's crazy. I always credit Kevin Gates with that, but he's also a rapper and just a guy who has been known to like do and say some really crazy things in the past. But this time he actually made headlines after an interview that he did went viral, where he was basically admitting to being molested as a child, and he basically stated that that is what drove him to write and to want to express himself to help cope with that trauma. So I wanted to take a look at his chart and to point towards some indicators that actually support this admission, because I looked at his chart before in the past. I don't think I've ever done a formal natal chart reading on him. And well, it's not really funny, but the interesting part about it is I've actually seen it before. I saw it, but just in the name of making this like a teachable moment, I just thought it would be interesting to go and talk about it from an astrological perspective, because that's what we do, right? So let's just go ahead and get started. So Kevin Border Gates was born February 5th, 1986 in New Orleans, Louisiana. We don't know his exact time of birth. However, we can safely deduce that he is, in fact, an Aquarius sun, with his sun at the 16th degree, as well as either a later degree Sagittarius moon or very early degree Capricorn moon, depending on exactly when it was he was born, what time. I would say his personality is a lot more in alignment with being a Sagittarius moon, just because, you know, a lot of Sagittarius moons, number one, are very much unpredictable. Even though he's an Aquarius suns can be unpredictable too, but he kind of has this wild card factor to himself. And he's also a very, very religious person, a very spiritual person. Throughout the years, he has experimented, or what I perceive to be experimented, with different religions and lifestyles, because I remember seeing him and his wife dressing in like Islamic garment at some point. Like, so I don't know if they're technically Muslims, but then, you know, he'll speak openly about being really big into even like occultism, which is also going to be attributed to other placements in his chart that we'll discuss later on. But that could also kind of be a branch off of that Sagittarius, not only moon, but he's also a Sagittarius Mars, with his Mars conjoined to Saturn in the sign of Sagittarius as well. And so having that Sagittarius moon would kind of cap this off perfectly, because it can produce a person who can, especially in their younger years, be very wild. You know, people who can be all over the place. Even when we start talking about men, these are men who may be whores, sluts, thoughts, right? Men who may not do really well when it comes to being a one woman's man, which a lot of people who know Kevin Gates knows that he's not, even despite him being married. You know, Kevin Gates is, you know, admittedly a kind of guy who needs a lot of options, right? And he just so happens to have an arrangement with his wife, Drika, where, you know, they have threesomes. She's very, you know, flexible and accommodating, almost like they're best friends first, which definitely also explains his Venus conjoined to Mercury in Aquarius. You could even look at that as like maybe even having some sort of like sister wives arrangement, them having threesomes, rotating women in and out their bed. Mercury is very, very flexible, right? And so is Venus in Aquarius. It's almost a relationship that functions more so as like a friendship, as opposed to like, you know, your stereotypical emotionally invested relationship where they could be friends but also add other people into the mix. And so it is very accommodating of a man who doesn't really like to narrow or limit himself to just one woman, which is very, very, very consistent with being a Sagittarius moon. Or even like his Mars, your Mars, especially in a man's chart, is your vitality, your sexual vitality. And even though it's conjoined to Saturn, the way that can still play out, you can look at this in the charts of people who, dick wise, especially with him being a Scorpio South Node, the dick might be small or a little on the smaller side. Maybe they could have some inadequacies they feel they have to overcompensate for, which is not lost upon me that he's had a sex tape before. And in this sex tape, I heard the dick was real small. Okay, but that's neither here nor there. But it could also create a man or a guy where, there could be some kind of insecurities around also even his sexuality, which would make a lot of sense in regards to him being a victim of sexual trauma and molestation. And so, you could look at Mars conjoined to his Saturn as like, debilitating or being something that could really kind of limit and stifle his sexuality or sexual expression. And you have people who kind of react or respond to that conjunction by shying away from it, meaning a person who may not be as sexually inclined, or who could do the opposite, especially when we start talking about Sagittarius, a sign like Sagittarius, and they could just be full on hoes. And so in many ways, they're fucking to kind of overcompensate for this inadequacy that they feel, right? Whether it be to their sexuality, their actual penis, or whatever the case may be. And with him also being a Sagittarius moon, it absolutely kind of coincides with that energy, right? And not to mention they're always traveling. That's very Sagittarius moon also. And so I just thought that was kind of interesting. But nonetheless, speaking to his Venus conjoined to Mercury, that could even deal with a man who could have a really difficult time finding everything he wants in just one woman, so he can maintain these kind of friends with benefits style connections, or many have different friends, different women, and different people on standby. It could also give him some really questionable tendencies in terms of his sexuality, which when you take into account his Mars conjoined to Saturn as well, it's like, then you also take into account that Aquarius is one of the signs of LGBTQ, homosexuality. Then he has his Venus in Aquarius conjoined to Mercury that could also create, maybe even some bisexual tendencies or something like that. It's just interesting. And if it's not Kevin, it could be the women that he's with, or where he can attract women who are willing to go both ways. Maybe Drika goes both ways, which is not a far stretch, right? A lot of people tend to have that kind of thing going on, but that's a different story for a different day. Like it's more acceptable for women to kind of be involved in those entanglements than men. But what I think he's not telling us is, I think Kevin Gates does have some, whether he acts on it, I don't know, but I do have a very strong suspicion that Kevin Gates could be at least bisexual. I think he has some same-sex attraction, which brings us to that Scorpio South Node. He has his South Node at the 3rd degree, and it's actually conjoined to his Pluto at the 7th degree. 7 is the number of victimization, right? It could deal with where somebody is, where somebody is maybe violated, where somebody can have a lot of their freedoms and things encroached upon, or, somebody kind of violates your boundaries, maybe is a better way to put that. And with the conjoined to Scorpio South Node, a lot of Scorpio South Nodes have lots of karmic debt surrounding sex, surrounding, even sexual demons. A lot of them could be used and abused either in past lifetimes or even in this lifetime, and be put in situations where they are raped. Some of them could be victims of molestation and all kinds of stuff. So this is actually the main placement that he has that supports that, or aspect you should say, with Pluto conjoined to that South Node, that could deal with him being a survivor of sexual rape, trauma, molestation. And considering Pluto is forming a quincunx to his Chiron at the 9th degree of Gemini, it's highly probable that it could have been by a family member. Chiron in Gemini could deal with wounds that are sustained by cousins, maybe even neighbors. Okay. And quincunxes deal with where, one has to kind of adjust, make some adjustments to certain things, right? Where it could be, a trauma, a wound. I mean, you could even look at this as like a psychological wound. But, one where one has to find their way out of it. They kind of got to work their way through that energy, right? And where it could have been like an ongoing thing. So not just like, okay, I was molested once, where it could have been like an ongoing thing, like over a course of time, a span of time, something could have been done to him. And, this Chiron and Gemini could also transmute into a person who, finds joy in writing. So you could look at that as him, finding writing, turning to writing to help him cope with this, sexual trauma. And then with his Chiron also opposing his Mars as well as Saturn, once again, it could create this scenario to where sexually it could fuck with a person's identity, where a person's sexual identity tends to split into two. And so he could have two parts of himself that could be in conflict with one another. In translation, issues with his sexual identity. So I even suspect that this sexual trauma could have come at the hands of a male, not to mention with him being a Aquarius sun. Aquarius, once again, is not only the sign of homosexuality, but in some really, really messed up cases, it can also deal with sexual perversions. And the sun can be the men in our lives. So, I mean, it could have been like a grown man, right? Especially with his sun conjoined Mercury as well. Maybe like an older, like a cousin or something like that. Like, it's kind of messed up. It's actually really, really messed up. So you could also look at his Chiron and Gemini forming that quincunx to his Pluto as there being some inappropriate touching. Okay, so once again, that kind of ties back into this theme of molestation, right? Inappropriate touching where his boundaries were being exploited that way. Hence that 7th degree once again. Gemini also deals with the hands. So, I mean, it could get very literal in that sense, right? So I just thought that was so crazy. Also, Scorpio does deal with the genitalia. It literally deals with like the penis or the vagina. So, somebody, touching his little pee-pee. It could also even deal with where there could be a lot of dysfunction surrounding one's, whether their sexual area, sexual organs, right? For men, their penis. So, which brings us right back around to his Mars, right? Mars conjoined to Saturn in Aquarius with that Scorpio South Node, where there could be some sort of deficiencies or irregularities with his dick. Like, so hence him having a small dick, but also, I mean, that could manifest in like health issues, like issues getting it up, like, later on down the line, all kinds of stuff. But in the literal sense, I could definitely see where there could have been some funny business going on, fondling. 7 is also a degree that could deal with sleep, so it could be a thing where like maybe, in the middle of the night, he had cousins and people coming up and touching him and doing this and doing that. But it could also, deal with where, he could potentially be the type of person to do the same. And I mean, I'm not saying that he is a rapist or anything of that sort, because that doesn't necessarily have to be true for everybody. But, with that Scorpio South Node, there comes a need for these people to have to resist the urge to, perpetuate that type of activity towards other people, or to, infringe upon other people or dominate and subdue other people. You know what I'm saying? R. Kelly has this Scorpio South Node. So these people, as a result of a lot of their trauma, can really be fighting demons, like demons. So, I empathize with that, because that's crazy. That's crazy. And nobody deserves to have that happen to them. And it's also not lost upon me that he and NBA Youngboy, even though I love Youngin, there are a lot of rumors about him being a closeted homosexual as well. And they actually not only worked together, but had like a very, very close relationship for quite some time. And of course, this isn't enough in and of itself to be like, okay, well, these two are lovers or they had something. But even just looking at Kevin Gates' chart, his sun, as well as his Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter happen to be at least, you know, in the same sign, but it could also be making a conjunction with NBA Youngboy's South Node. He's an Aquarius South Node. And so, I mean, you could look at, I mean, that could be the perfect recipe for it. Like, I'm going to say that for a different video for a different day. Let me know if you want me to do a synastry reading between Kevin Gates and NBA Youngin, because I got some thoughts and some ideas. I think some things, okay? And I actually think Drika knows this too. Intuitively, I do. I think he and Drika are real life best friends, and she knows almost everything there is to know about this man. And taking it back to him being a Scorpio South Node, there are going to be a lot of things surrounding sex, whether it be, once again, his own sexual identity or, you know, sexual trauma. A lot of things that could be, you know, that could be kind of secretive about. Actually very secretive about. And with his Mars, that Sagittarius Mars forming the quincunx to his North Node, it's like, you know, this could even do it where he actively has to go out of his way to try to conceal the truth surrounding his sexuality in many ways too. That's another way you could look at that. You know, as a Taurus North Node, you're supposed to live a life that's very upstanding and normative, but like, you know, with it forming a quincunx to his Mars, you know, at that second degree of Sagittarius, there could be a truth or certain truth about his sexuality or something that could be concealed, or, you know, just things to think about. Even when I think about that Aquarius stellium involving his sun, Mercury, Jupiter, and even Venus, like that could also be very indicative, especially with Jupiter contraparallel to his North Node, of somebody where there could be a shocking truth or something that comes out about him over the years. So, and before I wrap up this video, I just got a brain blast. I don't know if y'all have been on Kevin Gates or if y'all been watching Kevin Gates for a long time, but I have. I've been a follower of his for a long, long time. And I remember back in the day, y'all, this is maybe like 2014, 15. He was, you know, in the middle of some controversy because he was telling a story about how he was hooking up with his cousin. Like, you know, presumably a girl. And that they didn't know that they were cousins, but when they found out that they was cousins, they still kept fucking. Which brings us all the way back around the mountain to this Chiron at the 9th degree of Gemini, right? And it forming quincunx to his Pluto in Scorpio. Incest. That's an incestuous aspect. And if that's something that this man has admitted out of his mouth before, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if you were to take it a step further and he was involved in stuff like that earlier on, but with male cousins, and it goes deep. So Kevin Gates definitely got some weird trauma and just weird shit going on. Which is why he's always came off as so perverted to me. With Aquarius is one of the signs of perversions. Dark-sided Aquarians can be some of the most perverted, nastiest motherfuckers you've ever seen in your life. This is the same nigga who was talking about how he would make girls, like groupies who would hook up with him, suck his dog's dick, y'all. Suck his dog. Yes, bestiality, which is not lost upon me, because once again, when we start talking about Aquarius being the sign of perversions, he does have his Mercury. Mercury rules pets, right? A part of that equation, that Mercury conjoined the Venus. It's just, it's weird. And Mercury is also forming a contraparallel to Chiron in Gemini. Once again, cousins, like, it's just listen. I get it. I'm happy that he's been able to transmute his pain artistically, which is also very much in line with that Taurus North Node. But I think it's definitely fucked him up psychologically in a lot of ways, more ways than he's actually going to be willing to like come out and admit. But that's okay, because that's why I'm here. So y'all drop down in the comment section. Let me know what you thought about Kevin Gates' chart. Do you want to see a synastry reading between he and NBA Youngin? Because I do it. Okay? And yeah, make sure you practice unconditional self-love so that you can love others. And until the next video, I'll holla.